Moving on, let's look at an example of the common access control feature that you may have seen in many applications. Let's first look at the requirements. For the access control feature, we'll say we have 3 permissions, and that would be read, write, and execute. And then we will have 3 operations, that would be adding a permission, removing a permission, and validating a permission. Essentially mean checking if the user has the permission or not. We will look at implementing this in a regular array-based approach and then compare it with a bitwise approach. Got here 3 empty files, array-based approach. So we have 3 permissions here. Now we will write the 3 operations. Look at the add permissions. Takes in the permissions array and the permission that needs to be added. First we will check if the permission exists in the array, and if it is not, then add it. Return the updated permissions. Remove permission. So in this case we can simply return the filtered array. Check the permission if the given permission exists. Verify if working as expected. Add the read permission, add the write permission, log it. Let's see if this is working as expected. Cool. So we've got read and write added to the user permissions. We are removing the read permission, and then we'll console log the permissions array again. The read is removed. Now if you want to check write permission, user has write permission as true. This is a simple implementation of access control system, and we'll implement that in the bitwise approach now. In the bitwise approach, let's implement the add permission. We'll perform an OR operation, remove a permission, perform an AND of not, and if you want to check, we will simply perform an AND operation. This one we have already seen in the previous video. Please refer to the second video in this series to understand how each of these operators work. To check if this is working as expected, let's do the same. Copy checks from the array and paste it here. Let's see. The user has both read and write permissions, which is 3. Then we remove the read permission, so he only has the write permission, which is 2. Finally, if we check write permission, that is true. Now let's run some benchmarks on both the approaches to compare the performance. Let's export the 3 functions. Let's export it from the bitwise as well, and then we'll import both in the benchmark file, and then we'll define our constants for the permissions, also the constants for bitwise. Let's create a common benchmark function. Takes in a function and it has the number of iterations, and then it measures the performance and logs the difference of time. Let's create our test functions. First we have the array-based test. We'll start with an empty permissions array, then we'll add the read and write permissions, then we'll remove the read permission, and then we'll check whether we still have the write permission. We'll do the same for the bitwise approach, and then we'll run the benchmark test for both the functions. Let's set the default to 1000 iterations. This is essentially for bulk operation, and you'll see the array-based approach takes just over 1.3 milliseconds, and the bitwise approach takes 0.2 milliseconds. Increase iteration to 100,000. The difference is the array-based approach takes 17 milliseconds, and the bitwise takes 2 milliseconds. Increase it to 10 million, you will see the array test takes 700 milliseconds and the bitwise takes 68 milliseconds. Let's say we want a list of all the users that have read-only permission, write-only, execute, the list of users that have both read and execute, and the list of users who have all the permissions. So we have the 3 permissions. For this case, we will generate a list of users who are randomly assigned to multiple permissions, and then we will have the list of users for our array-based approach. And then we have the bitwise approach for finding the list of users, and then we have the array-based approach for finding the list of users who have specific permissions, and then we'll run the benchmark for 1000 users and compare it with the array-based approach. So for the 1000 users, the Bitwise approach takes 0.18 milliseconds and the array-based approach takes 0.3 milliseconds. Increase it to 100,000, takes about 2 milliseconds versus the array approach taking 5 milliseconds.